Bullshit.
It's the No BS Marketing Show. I'm your host, Dave Mastovich. Our guest today is Audrey Russo. But first, let's hit the bullseye. I love this guest. I love this guest. She appreciates me. It's beautiful.
I do.
Robert Cialdini is back. Well, he never went away, but one of the foremost thinkers on human behavior and author of the 2006 bestseller Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion, has a new book updating his thoughts on the 6 principles of influence. Cialdini revisits those concepts and adds even more insights in his new book called Persuasion. Persuasion, a revolutionary way to influence and persuade. Cialdini points out that the peak performers, from a communication standpoint, capitalized on privileged moments for change, which Audrey has already touched on some of those, so this hits home for her, during which people become receptive to a message before they experience it. One of his quotes is, "Optimal persuasion is achieved through optimal persuasion. To change minds, first change states of minds." He goes on in the book to update his 6 principles of influence, which are reciprocity, which is the whole thing that in pharmaceutical sales started it, where you buy someone food and then they feel obligated to you. But there's whole theories behind reciprocation. Liking, we tend to buy from people that we like and that are like us. Social proof, it's like in college when you walk past a bar and it's packed, you want to go in that bar.
Right.
Authority, you have an expert here in Audrey, and we're going to listen to her. Scarcity is, you want that bread when it comes out of the oven and you can smell that it's fresh. And consistency, we want to live up to who we are, and we talk a lot about that on this show. I want you all as listeners to leverage Cialdini's principles and hit the bullseye with your messaging. The No BS Show is brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/nobs. Try a book like The Power of Habit, Why We Do What We Do in Life and Business by Charles Duhigg. You can download it for free today at audibletrial.com/nobs. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Our guest today is Audrey Russo, President and CEO of the Pittsburgh Technology Council. Since joining the council in 2007, Audrey's built and led a team that's grown the organization to over 1,400 member companies with more than 270,000 member employees from just about every industry in this region. She also serves as board chair of the World Affairs Council of Pittsburgh and is a board member of the Jewish Community Center of Greater Pittsburgh, the Regional Industrial Development Center, and many other places. Audrey, welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
So you talked in the first episode about you went to The Ohio State University after being a native New Yorker. You had a half dozen internships in only 3 years. You immediately came out. You got these jobs leading hundreds of people at age 22, 23, 24.
Mm-hmm. Just a punk.
And people came up and asked, was your mom around or were your parents around?
I remember my parents actually didn't believe it. They came out to visit me from New York just to make sure I wasn't BSing them.
Well, it's the truth. We share some similarities. I remember my parents, when I told them I'm running these 2 radio stations at age 21 years old, I think they thought I was BSing. Right. And then they heard my name announced on the radio as the general manager and the turnaround. And then they came and saw the station. Everybody's going, would you like me to do this? Would we do that? And so then
I know,
it's
right?
the same thing.
Same thing.
So you go through that, and then you were passionate about, you went to Syracuse for your master's in public policy, and you learned that you were passionate about systems, technology, finance, and driving change. Mm-hmm. And so that has been kind of
that's my mantra.
Key mantra throughout your career. You end up going to Reynolds, which gets merged with Alcoa. You go through a whole transformation there and learning from the legendary Paul O'Neill, who ended up being
amazing man.
Ended up being on George W. Bush's cabinet.
Amazing guy.
And he had a key why. His why for Alcoa was safety first. And you quickly pointed out in episode 1 that we would fail every test here at the No BS show, which is impressive. It's impressive. We would fail the safety thing. So I could fall and get strangled by my microphone cord.
Well, I'm worried about that plant. Is it going to fall?
There are wires everywhere. So then you go to one of the coolest companies in Pittsburgh, Maya Design, a spinoff of Carnegie Mellon. And you spend a great deal of time there and you enjoy that. Then you end up at the Pittsburgh Tech Council, which we'll spend a lot of the time talking about on episode 2 here. But now's the time to ask about mentors. Other than family, who are your mentors and how have they impacted you?
It's such an interesting question because there is no one human. first of all, I have learned more from bad bosses and bad colleagues than I've learned from quote unquote great people. Okay. I mean, I take snippets of who I am from so many different people. And I don't mean this to sound BS. When I think growing up, people who really inspired me were part of the books I read. There were not a lot of women that were out in the forefront doing incredible things. And I would read a lot. I would read everything from Ayn Rand to watching the strength, and you might laugh, of like a character called Pippi Longstocking, to that were doing things sort of against all odds and speaking out about things that were against all odds. So, like even the Jefferson Airplane, Grace Slick, who was, you might say, oh, she was a druggie, etc. But she was defying sort of the rules. And that always intrigued me. It intrigued me. I used to listen to a radio show in New York, WNEW, and I used to put my little headphones on at night, and there was a woman by the name of Allison Steele, the night bird. And her name, she'd say, "This is Allison Steele, the night bird." And she would do this show of this music, and she inspired me. She inspired me because it was against all odds, and I saw capability of women. I didn't have role models in terms of women growing up that were doing sort of amazing things. So, and the other thing is that really what I learned from mostly are people who come to me for actual advice or for mentorship. And, mentorship, to me, there's a little bit of a myth. It's not a long-term relationship. It could be a moment in time. It could be the exchange that you and I have right now and that I glean. Like you were talking about Persuasion, that book. I hadn't heard of it, and I jot it down, and I think I want to read it. And I actually like the way you captured the description of that book. And that moment could shift my thinking from that moment on. And I think people very often confuse that with a mentor, like someone that's going to grab you, pick you up, help push you, move you into that direction. The way I feel is if I have to do that for you, you're not someone I want to invest time in. We all need a kick in the ass, right? We all need that at different points in time. And hopefully we get it from amazing people, right? People that we respect, people that we, can count on. But I can't tell you that there's been one person in my life that has taken an interest in Audrey and tried to move her into other opportunities. I can't say that. I actually feel that there really has never been just one person. I think it's a collection of people. I mean, I had an aunt in my life that, saw something in me that no one else really saw. And, so we developed sort of an interesting relationship. And I've had people in my life who have worked for me that I have helped develop them over time. And now they're doing things that are greater than what they ever thought. One of the things is working for someone like me. I often have bigger dreams for people than they have for themselves. And that's always a danger. Because there are some people who come to work or come to an environment and they just sort of want to get through it. They want to do good work. They want to, feel okay about it. But at the end of the day, they really want to check out and they don't live their life for this passion, that this is not their passion. So it's always a danger working for someone like me because I find a lot of passion in the work that I do. And it's very important to me to feel like I'm making an impact and having a difference. And that difference could be on my team, my staff, in developing them. It could be in a company that I'm helping. It could be on a particular policy that I'm trying to infuse. It could be on a mega trend shift that I'm trying to rally around. So people who have influenced me very often are writers or people who, bad bosses. I had a great boss at Reynolds and a guy that we were absolutely the opposite of one another. And he knew that in order to drive the kind of transformation he was seeking, that he needed someone like me. And we had a really unusual relationship. People would have thought, how do the two of them work together? But he was so open to learning and I was so open to feedback that it became like a magical kind of exchange. But that was over just like a 2-year period. Did he pull me up? He kicked me. He kicked me around and he expected great from me. And do I keep up with him? No. Every once in a while, do I think about him? Sure. One time I had a woman that I worked for, and I was in my early 20s, and she said to me, you have to speak in front of people. You have to be a public speaker. I was like, I will never be a public speaker. Yes, you do. And she forced me. She put me in front of a room with about 100 people, and I could tell you, I felt like I saw a ghost. I felt like my heart was racing. I was palpitating. And now, look at me. Even a few years after that, I was always speaking. But it was like that moment, she saw something in me and knew that it was really important that I master this for my career. And I laugh to this day because I don't get nervous when I speak. I love to be in front of a crowd. I always feel like I have something to say. And I always am really caring about what that, how people receive that information. And is it being authentic? And am I able to make my point? So those little moments, yeah, she was a mentor, right? And then I worked for bad bosses. I worked for bosses who sexual harassment, degradation, isolation, humiliation, totally have been subjected to that. And I'm not proud of it, but I can tell you that it made me understand more of who I am and what matters.
That's Audrey Russo, the president and CEO of Pittsburgh Technology Council. I found it really interesting as you were talking about the bad bosses piece, because I could take bosses that happened with, but I'm going to actually take a coach, because one of my passions has been coaching. Right out of college, I've coached at multiple different levels. And I had this coach that was tremendous at teaching preparation and teaching the fundamentals of the sport, but he was awful at motivating people and at game situations. And it's interesting the influence it had on me, because I am very structured. Anyone that plays for me will say I'm very structured.
Right.
But on the other hand, I very early wanted to become a player's coach, and it was because of what I saw there and learned from him not being good at that.
Right. Interesting.
And it's so I think within people, there's good and bad too that we learn. We learn some good traits from our
absolutely.
like that guy.
Absolutely.
I would call a not good coach, but yet I learned a big piece of my coaching style on the organization side from him, even though he's not an overall good coach.
Right.
So let's talk about a learning experience, though, when maybe you were a BS employee, a tough boss, or your communication was not what it needed to be. Looking back, when do you think you might have been guilty of some BS?
Well, I have so many learnings, right? So many. I had one of my employees killed on the job and through domestic violence. And I was shocked. I was totally shocked. Did I handle that well with my entire staff? Probably not. And, it was a safety situation. There were indicators. None of us thought about it. The supervisors didn't think about it. And we're just like, we saw, we had indicators, but no one ever believed it. Her boyfriend killed her. So that was sort of crazy, right? I handled it, I think, very poorly. I should have pulled people together immediately, had a better plan on communication. I regret that. I really, even to this day. Is there anything I could have done differently? Sure. Hindsight. That's why I'm pretty passionate about this domestic violence and how it affects the workplace, because it really does. And because you just can't bifurcate your life. There are decisions that I have made. Again, hey, I once told my boss to F off. How about that? How about that?
Did you keep the job?
No. Hell no. I got moved into like an assignment, quote unquote. But
well, what led to that? You don't just walk in one day and say that.
No, what happened was we were disagreeing on a whole bunch of points and I thought that the information that I was providing had high integrity, and he wanted me to do something different with it that I felt wasn't right. And we fought about it and fought about it. It wasn't just like one moment. It was many moments, right? And then I finally just said, F off, I'm not going to do it. It was sort of like, there's this whole thing about integrity, right? Which we all hopefully believe that that's what we hold near and dear to our hearts. But very often, you can get bogged down in thinking that the technology you're using is the right one. There's this whole thing in tech about being a tech zealot and missing the big picture. Like this is the solution, this is what we have to do, and then not really considering what the end game is, but you become very, very narrow in your thinking. We see that, right? I mean, you don't just see that in technology, you see that in marketing, you see that in sales. And I think I owned it too much, right? I think I just thought my level of that integrity and my definition, I thought should apply to the whole world. And how dare you violate that? And I think I just went down a narrow, slippery slope and didn't see sort of the big picture. And so getting back to what I have spoken with you about before is when you stay close to the customer is when the likelihood is that you don't become that kind of narrow zealot. And that was my learning from there. But boy, did I F up. And I became righteous, this kind of thing. Like one of my bosses once said to me, Audrey, you need to dumb down your presentations. You need to dumb it down and break it down because you come off as too elite. And that doesn't endear people to get on board with what it is that you're trying to accomplish. If you minimize someone's asking you about what that really means and come off as condescending, they're never going to follow you. It's all about influence. And that was like a turning point for me. It's really about influence. And building relationships it's easy to be hierarchical. It's easy to just say, do what I tell you to do. If not, X. That's easy. But that's not what cultivates people. And that's not what shifts to greatness. And I think these examples that I've just shared with you are examples of where I really effed up, thinking that I'm right. It's not always about just being right.
Mm-hmm. And it seems like that when you're that early achiever, like we were,
right.
I think because I had a similar experience where I needed to be humbled because I was very passionate. And the things that I was preaching at that time were very clearly proven to be correct.
Right.
Not being arrogant.
Mine too.
Not being arrogant. But my delivery was shitty.
Right.
And because of my delivery, I was labeled and put in a box as difficult.
Right. Exactly.
And you have to be humbled and say, okay, am I going to keep going down that or do I change how I deliver it?
Well, and the thing is, I would push you a little bit. It's not even just delivery. It's about engagement and influence.
Mm-hmm.
Because you've got, I mentioned earlier, we're interdependent. We can't ever do anything on our own. So as a result, you have to create relationships that are meaningful and have a lot of reciprocity.
Cialdini.
I know, he wrote my book. That's the book I should have written.
Yes.
But I think that was my learning from all those F-ups.
Yes.
And because I was very arrogant. And I think the way that you've described yourself is probably exactly how I was. Because when you succeed early, you're reinforced, and you get a little oblivious.
Yes.
Right?
Without a doubt.
And that cockiness can serve you in a wrong way.
Yeah, there's that fine line between that cockiness and confidence, and you need to keep it. And then what I ended up doing was I overcompensated the other way, and I still probably don't have the confidence that I used to have because I now overcompensate to say like, okay, am I being too forceful on this? And then the interesting thing is you really have to manage self so much because now I find myself being weaker the other way. I'm a little too much latitude. So it's interesting how you constantly have to play the mind game with yourself because as a professor, as a leader here at Mass Solutions, as a representative with clients, I've now gone the other way, maybe too far. Right. And my team will say to me, you kind of just need to tell them that's what we're doing.
Right. Because you're trying to be inclusive and you're trying to, right. That's really great. And the other thing is this kind of exchange that we're having right now, to me, is the kind of exchange that most leaders need to have with one another. Mm-hmm. And very often we don't take the time to do that. And we don't have the confidence in one another or the trusting to be able to cultivate that kind of exchange. Mm-hmm. And you don't get great by being in a silo.
Exactly.
So thank you for this therapy.
Thank you. A couple of guests have said it's therapy. I like it. It's great. It's therapy for me too. So now, I've talked to you on the pre-show. I said how Paul O'Neill, when you brought that up totally spontaneously, ties back to this. We were talking about Simon Sinek and Start With Why. And I always say how reading that book was powerful to me as a CEO, but I realized that for my company and for my clients, there are two whys. Your why or reason for being, and your customer's why or reason for buying. So I challenge the guest on the spot to think about that, because they might have their mission statement, their why. Paul O'Neill's why was safety.
Right.
When he wanted to communicate to the general public, he could communicate safety, but they didn't care as much. So he had to communicate to his target audiences a little bit different message and combine those two whys, your why or reason for being, your customer's why or reason for buying. Crystallize that into one big idea or memorable message that makes an emotional impact. And this can be for you personally,
right,
or it could be for the Pittsburgh Tech Council. What's your big idea?
Well, for me personally, what drives me is being involved and leading, doing something that's larger than myself. Okay, so what does that really mean? In when it comes to the Tech Council, larger than myself means driving this region so that the technology and innovation business community, no matter what size, is thriving. And thriving means that people are moving here, that people are planting themselves here. And even though their customers are global and, the world is definitely flat, but that they are here because the only way this is going to be an amazing city over these next 100 years is the seeds that we're planting right now to yield those fruits. So at the Tech Council, that's really what we do. So that's why it really nicely aligns in terms of my personal sort of doing something bigger than yourself and, driving something that's going to have a long, long impact. And, that's what motivates me, that it isn't just a fleeting exchange for now. And we're not doing a tactical kind of build. And the other part of your question was, frame that for me again. The other part of your question is
your why is what you described, your company's why, but then what's your customer's why? What's their reason for buying?
So their reason for buying is to make sure that they have all their tools that they need to grow their businesses. And no company, what's really interesting is, remember when I said you can't do anything alone? They can't do it alone either. So if they can be better networked, because it's not within the four walls of the confines of their work, and that's going to augment their capability to take their companies and their business to the next level, that's their why. So whether they're chief information officers or chief security officers, they know that they're networked with others who are doing similar work, but that they have a safe haven for them to cultivate so that one thing to do best practices, people can read about it. They can, figure out a way to sort of benchmark, but it's another for them to coalesce together so that they can share. And that's a why. It's a why for them. The other why is for people to be part of a bigger ecosystem, because for them, very often they're trying to attract talent. Talent comes in pairs very often. They've got to make sure that they know what's out there in terms of who's running what company, who's doing different things. And maybe not only for talent attraction, because people come in pairs, but also for them to do business together. Very often these companies are working together for the first time, that they didn't realize, we have an adjacent market. I can do X, you can do Y. Together, we can go after Z. And that becomes a tremendous opportunity for them too. So any of those kinds of pathways, whether it's international affairs, whether it's the example that I gave of taking companies to different markets so that they can get exposed to John Deere. We've done that with wind. We've done that with, even going up to Cleveland and Lincoln Electric, the kinds of things that might not be in our region, but creating those tetherings helps at every single level for them. So if we're working on a strategy with the airport so that the airport, we have a great relationship with the CEO of the airport, trying to make sure that flight patterns are more direct and more robust. That helps. Our members love that, because they know that they're attracting people from all over the world, and those people from all over the world need to be sure that they can get to and fro to different places.
Mm-hmm.
Because they live these whole lives that include families that might live other places as well. And those are the things that make it really, really important for Pittsburgh to be a desirable place for people to work, live, and play.
Great stuff. Is there a recent success story you want to talk about? Because you talked about the John Deere taking 28 CEOs, but is there a recent success story or two that you want to tell the story here to our audience? Because that's kind of compelling to me also, is to hear how you get the word out, because you are doing so much great stuff. And I keep tabs on what you're doing, and I read some of the blogs that posts that you have. And then you were talking about some future endeavors to communicate. But what's some of the things
we have so many, but there's another one besides just recently in this last quarter. We pulled together a trip to go to the Bay Area, which we do. And this particular trip was for entrepreneurs and founders of tech companies to understand the new world of journalism. And, I don't want to go down that slippery slope. I'm not talking about fake news. I'm not talking about that stuff. I'm talking about how does the world get to know about the innovations of some of these companies. How do you get TechCrunch to write about you? How do you get Wired? How do you get the best Twitter, person who, has 2 million followers to grab your story? Because it's really important. And as you know better than I do, that is a very, very critical piece of the marketing world today. And so we coalesced a bunch of those quote unquote writers who write, like, whether for private equity or they write for TechCrunch or they write for Mashable. We get them together and to meet these entrepreneurs, because you can't pitch your story, right? But you can connect in an authentic way that might create some intrigue. And we've seen successful results of that. We just did that a couple of months ago. We did that last year in New York. And we now see what's happened is many of those writers are coming back into the Pittsburgh area because they met us or they heard about a couple of companies. They may not write about every company, but it's given them, they want deal flow too. They need new stories. So that's something that we do for companies, and the kinds of success. Most recently, PE Hub wrote about Pittsburgh, and that's a private equity group that, all the private equity folks, subscribe to. And that story may not have made it into, the New York Times, but it's powerful stuff. And the amount of people that have reached out to us as a result of that PE Hub story is now, again, additive in terms of the storytelling that's going on for the region. So it helps the entrepreneurs, it helps the Pittsburgh region, it helps us, be able to create that kind of intersection in terms of the energy, and it creates a buzz in a market that you couldn't have pitched to, because you can't say, I'm great, do a story on me. That's not how it works.
Exactly.
So, we work at that, and that's long, that's deliberate. It takes hard work. It takes time. And now in this whole era of Facebook and Twitter and Pinterest and, Medium and, all these different things, there's a lot of noise that it becomes even more complex to try to get that messaging out. So that's an example.
That's Audrey Russo, President and CEO of the Pittsburgh Technology Council. And Audrey, now we're going to ask you to pick a tool, your secret weapon, or something that you use. It's a blog, a productivity resource that helps tell your story. Could be a book, could be an app, anything you think might help our listeners.
Okay, first of all, my attention span sometimes is long and sometimes is very short. So one of the things that I have to really do is to make sure that I figure out ways to sort of cut through the noise. Because, you've got Twitter, you've got, Facebook, I'm always trying, got LinkedIn, trying to always get our messaging out. And I help with that in the organization just because I probably have a propensity towards marketing and communication. And I know that that's so important because I write and I speak and I do all those things. So I have a natural gravitas. So one thing I want to tell everyone is that when I totally have to decompress, I play Scrabble and I play it online, with strangers. And, so I do need to tell you, I played competitive Scrabble in a previous life. So, but that totally takes me into a zone where I can just forget about it, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I usually have like 17 games going around the same time with different people. The other thing is this whole thing about news and information. So I subscribe to Medium, and I get Medium alerts on different topics that I really sort of care about. And I try to spend some time reading some things. And I also make a very conscious effort to try to read both. And I don't mean this just in terms of politics, but I include politics in this, both left reading and right reading. Because I think now in the world of journalism, it's very, very hard to ascertain what is sort of truth.
Exactly.
And so I make sure that I'm reading really conservative things and I'm reading really liberal things, because I believe that's the only way that I can keep my capability to discern and be a critical thinker. And I spend a lot of time doing that. And I listen to podcasts. I actually listen a lot to Tim Ferriss.
So do I.
Do you?
Yes.
Yeah, I listen to him because I think I'm better than him, actually. But
I like it.
I do. I think I'm better than him. So I listen to Tim Ferriss, and I like that he chunks it out into little pieces and lets you know when you can, sort of dial in.
That's funny that you said it, because it's like when I listen to Ferriss, I always go, yeah, there's a couple nuggets in there, but it's kind of overhyped in some respects.
Isn't it overhyped? Like, what are we doing wrong?
Yeah, exactly.
Seriously.
When my staff hears this episode, they're going to laugh because I say this.
I say this too. I say this to Jonathan, who's like my right hand in communication at Jonathan Kirsting, who does all our visibility. I go, Jonathan, I'm better than this guy. I have much more substance. How did he do this? Why can't we do this? But I listen to him.
I do too.
But I listen to him because he gets some of those cool guests that I want to hear
and
from.
I also do the political thing. I like to go from MSNBC to Fox.
Right.
And watch them both lie.
Right. I do the same thing. Because I worry about people who say, I'm not going to listen to that, or I'm not going to listen to this, because I feel like it's back to the whole thing that you talked about, learning, that we've got to continue. The other thing is, Uber has been a really interesting thing in terms of my life in Pittsburgh, because I have met the most incredible people that are using Uber, and I talk to all of them. I wish I could do podcasts with every Uber driver that I meet.
Oh my gosh, this is amazing. I've said that this is the next podcast I want to do.
That's what I want to do. Let's do it together.
I want to do when you get an Uber driver, because they have such interesting stories. Right. I've said this. My sons are going to laugh if I'm going to force them to listen to this episode.
No, I am going to do this. This is what I want to do.
We should do it together. I have a task cam that we could take. You could take a task cam with you anytime you go into the podcast.
One time it was my birthday, and I got in the car and I had this crazy day, and I'm like, God, it's my birthday. Can't I just not work today? It was one of those moments. I had all these things going on. I get into the car and the guy says, so why is this day so special for you? And I go, well, it's my effing birthday. And he then breaks out into a cappella and sings me this reggae gospel kind of birthday song. And he tells me that he was a musician, and he thought that would cheer my day up. I was like, oh my gosh. I love you. Who are you?
It's incredible.
Isn't it incredible?
Isn't it amazing how the cross-section of Uber drivers, that you get some that are doing it on the side and they were displaced from a great job. And there's other people that are retired and they tell you their life story. Right. It can definitely be, I'm not kidding you. 6 months ago, I said to my team, we should do this, and I should just take this task cam and just interview a bunch of
I'm serious. The thing is, why I was being in New York, I don't remember building relationships like this with cab drivers.
It's a whole different mindset.
And I sit in the front seat. I do too. I sit in the front.
I do too. My kids make fun of me. They say, you sit in the front. I just sit in the back. I'm like, no.
No, I sit in the front. I want to know, who are you? What are you doing? What are you up to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is comical.
That's great.
Any other questions you thought I'd ask that I didn't?
I'm sure there's probably a ton where, I'm happy to just be on the show.
That means we have to have you back.
Have me back. We'll do the Uber show.
We'll do the Uber show together. That'll be great.
Thank you so much.
Audrey, thank you for being on the show. To our listeners, thanks for joining us for the No BS Marketing Show. Visit masssolutions.biz/bold solutions for show notes, plus additional marketing and messaging resources. Are you signed up for Light Reading? You'll receive valuable strategies every week to improve your marketing and transform your message. It really is light, intended to be read in 2 minutes or less, and it just might trigger bright ideas for you. To sign up again, visit masssolutions.biz. Remember, ask yourself, what's the big idea? And build your story around the answer. It's all about